Over the last month, I've been using the Essential phone as my main phone. Today, I decided to talk about the specifications of the phone and review them to let people know if it is worth buying. This is the Essential phone specs video. Hello everybody, my name is Matt and this is Real World Review. What I'm going to do is go over the specs of the phone, and at the end I will score the phone based on my personal experiences as a user and cell phone repairman. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments section or on Twitter at MattofRWR. Let's get started. To start, our first category is the outside hardware. Let's start with the display. The display is a 5.71-inch IPS LCD screen with a resolution of 1312 by 2560, totaling 504 pixels per inch. The maximum screen brightness is about 500 nits, which is pretty standard. There is Corning Gorilla Glass 5 covering the LCD, making the front scratch resistant. The screen to body ratio is about 85% and has extremely thin bezels and a notch. The screen has a 19 by 10 ratio, but it doesn't look as weird as it sounds. Let's talk about the rest of the front. We start at the top where the earpiece and sensors are. There's a speaker grill that covers the earpiece at the very top, with an LED for notifications on the left side of that. Below that, crammed into the notch, are the proximity and ambient light sensors, along with an 8 megapixel front camera. Unlike some Samsung phones I've been reviewing, this phone actually has a front-facing microphone crammed with that top earpiece. On the bottom portion, there is just a black bar. That's it. Moving on to the frame. On the bottom is a USB-C 3.0 port, a microphone, 10 open ovals for the loudspeaker, and a SIM card tray. On the right side, there is a small power button and 2 separate volume buttons. On the left side, there is nothing but antenna lines. And on the top, there is nothing at all, except for a lonely antenna line. On the back of the device, there are 2 13 megapixel cameras that are flush into the back of the phone. To the left of that is a dual LED flash unit along with a laser autofocusing unit. To the right of that is the third microphone and the 2 accessory power pins. Under that is a glass fingerprint scanner, and under all of this is a piece of ceramic that comes with a glossy or matte finish. Essential says that there are 4 microphones, but the teardown only shows 3 microphones attached to the logic board. I can't find the 4th one anywhere. As for the size, the device is 141.5mm tall, 71.1mm wide, and 7.8mm thick, or 5.57 inches tall, 2.80 inches wide, and 0.31 inches thick. As for the weight, the Essential phone is 185 grams or 6.53 ounces. The phone is not water resistant and does not have a user removable battery or back. And now we move on to the cameras. There are 2 13 megapixel sensors with a dual LED flash and a laser autofocus unit. The aperture is f1.85 on both cameras. One of them is a color sensor, while the other one is a monochrome sensor. This phone supports different camera features like portrait mode, high dynamic range, and black and white mode. The rear camera can record video in a couple of ways. You can record 4K at 30 frames per second, 1080p at 30 or 60 frames per second, and slow motion can be captured at 720p at 120 frames per second. The front camera is an 8 megapixel sensor with a f2.2 aperture. It allows for a max of 4K recording at 30 frames per second. That is full 4K, which leads me to believe that the camera is actually larger than 8 megapixels, even though it is advertised as 8. It also captures video at 16 by 9 rather than the normal 4 by 3. The next category is the inside hardware. As usual, we start with the processor. The processor in this phone is a 64-bit Qualcomm Snapdragon 835 chip. It is a 10nm octa-core processor with 4 cores running at 2.45 GHz and the other 4 cores running at 1.9 GHz. Geekbench gives the phone a score of around 1,944 for the single core and 6,651 for the multi-core test. The GPU is an Adreno 540 that runs at 710 MHz. When testing the GPU, Geekbench gives the phone a score of around 7,745. The phone has 4GB of LPDDR4 RAM, which is pretty standard for most flagship phones. The model I'm reviewing is the A11 and it is unlocked. With that said, the IMEI seems to be a CDMA number, starting with 99. The phone supports 1G, 2G, 3G, and 4G, assuming that the market you're in still supports those, along with LTE bands 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8, 11, 12, 13, 17, 19, 20, 21, 25, 26, 28, 29, 30, 34, 38, 39, 40, 41, 42, 43, and 66. As for Wi-Fi and Bluetooth, the Wi-Fi chip is 802.11a, b, g, n, AC MIMO, and the Bluetooth is version 5.0. The phone also supports NFC, GPS, and GLONASS. The battery is a 3040 mAh lithium-ion cell that is supposed to last all day. Essential doesn't have any claims for the battery life, but it should last all day, just like most phones in its class. This phone does support power delivery up to 27 watts, which should give you a full battery in about an hour and a half. Also, 5 minutes of charging will give you about a 10% boost. This phone comes out of the box with Android 7.1 Nougat and has recently been updated to Android 9 Pie. This is one of the only phones with Android Pie at the time of this recording. Hopefully this phone will get Android Q whenever that comes out. This phone supports a bunch of different audio formats like FLAC, MP3, M4A, and WAV. As for video playback, the phone supports a few formats like MP4 and H.264. Now that we have gone over the specs, it's time for us to give this phone a score. Note that this phone comes with 128GB built in and can be purchased new for $399. With this said, Essential will give you some good price discounts if you want to buy just the phone, whereas the Essential website sometimes gives you some bundles with the $399 price tag. It should also be noted that this phone is a year old and most people will want to buy this phone used, and the scoring does account for that. But at the price, you might as well get it new. Let's start with the frame. The phone is made out of glass, titanium, ceramic, and plastic. The front is mainly glass while the back is ceramic. This is an interesting choice because most companies go with glass and metal, whereas Essential went a new route. While it doesn't do too much for comfort, it does help for dropping. The issue, however, is that the screen has a plastic buffer between that and the titanium frame, and it is really thin. The plastic frame chips off pretty easily. Some may think that the back is kind of basic, but I kind of like it. The sensors and the openings are in appropriate places, and there's no obtrusive branding. Actually, there's no branding anywhere on this phone. It's actually refreshing. The back is ceramic, which is supposed to be stronger than regular glass used on other phones, and it seems to be true. As for bending, the phone is pretty solid, and I think the titanium is the reason why. The fingerprint scanner is actually circular and it is made out of glass or ceramic, so it isn't easy to scratch. I think it's glass, but who knows, it might be made out of ceramic. Most companies will actually use plastic sensors, which scratch really easily. I like the different color choices that Essential offers, especially the Stellar Gray and the Ocean Depths. Personally, I have the Halo Gray and the Black Moon because why not? The Gorilla Glass 5 holds up well, but I would say that the LCD is a weak part of this phone. In my experience, it's somewhat easy to break. One major disappointment is that the phone is missing a headset jack, which I feel is an essential piece of a phone nowadays. Overall, I would give the outside hardware an 8.75 out of 10. Next is the screen. Most of the phones that I review have OLED screens of some sort, but on the Essential phone we're dealing with an IPS LCD, which isn't that bad. With the rounded corners, notched screen, and an ambient display, it makes you wonder why Essential went with an LCD rather than an OLED panel. Even at the launch price of $700, Essential could have easily put an OLED panel in this phone and still made good money. That was one of the main reasons why I wasn't interested in this phone when it launched, because LCDs don't give off the best looking pictures, and this phone is no different. Sure, it looks nice like most phones, but just like the Razer phone, it would have made more sense if they focused on the screen quality rather than the screen look. I mean, yeah, it has a notch, but if your screen sucks, then who cares? The screen is technically a 2K screen, but apps like YouTube don't recognize the phone as that, limiting it to 1080p video. Yeah. I think the worst thing is that even a year later, there are some apps that don't work properly with the notch. Like this. This is annoying. Come on, this is a Google app on Android Pie, which is supposed to support notches. Even though there is a little bar on the bottom of the screen really does extend to the bottom, which is crazy. I criticize Essential for adding a chin to the bottom of this phone, but after disassembling the phone, it makes sense why they had to do that. The aspect ratio seems weird at 19:10, but it actually is pretty normal, just like the iPhone X. Maybe it's because of the notch, but who knows? 5.8 inches isn't too bad, but honestly I wish they went for a 6 to 6.2 inch screen with the same design. There are some complaints about the screen brightness, but I have no issues with it. Also in direct sunlight, it's still easy to read. The screen isn't the worst, but it could be better, so it will get a 7.25 out of 10. Next is the inside hardware. The Snapdragon 835 processor was the top of the line in 2017, but it's still awesome in 2018. With this said, I did have some lag when playing PUBG, which is kind of weird. The 3040 mAh battery is decent. Okay, it's not that bad, but it really isn't anything to brag about. The loudspeaker is not good. Also, the earpiece is nothing special either, but it isn't terrible. Having stereo speakers would help, but I wish that they would just put a higher quality speaker in this phone. They brag about being MQA capable, but really they expect you just to listen with your headphones. The thing is that this phone does not have a headset jack, so yeah. I don't know what they were thinking, but we just have to deal with it, I guess. Also, you can't just use any headset jack adapter. The adapter has to have a built-in DAC, and if it doesn't, the adapter will simply not work. Kind of dumb. This seems to be a common thing with other companies, except for one major company that I've tested. Only Motorola seems to not care if it has a built-in DAC or not. Go Motorola. As for memory, 128 gigabytes is still pretty good. Sure, it doesn't take an SD card, but there aren't many flagship phones out there that come with 128 gigabytes standard. The phone does get warm, but it stays relatively cool. 4 gigabytes of RAM is a decent choice when it comes to phones nowadays, but I didn't really have any issues with the multitasking or app switching, so it isn't a bad thing. Overall, I will give this phone a 7.75 out of 10 for the inside hardware. Next is the camera. The camera isn't that bad. I was told that the camera was decent, but it actually produces some vibrant shots. My only complaint is with the night shots. The camera takes decent low light pictures, but if it's too low, the images will come out looking like it's 20 pixels per shot. It's crazy. As for the front camera, that's also decent. The images come out alright, but when it comes to zooming in, it makes you wonder how this is an 8 megapixel shot. The interesting thing is that the camera can actually capture 4K video, which I haven't seen in any other phone, at least for the front camera. As for the camera app itself, it's kind of basic, but it makes sense because, it's the essential phone. It just has the essentials. There was a black and white feature on this phone, but to me it looks exactly the same as putting a grayscale filter on the image, so I don't know, it's interesting. Overall, I believe that the camera gets a 7.75 out of 10. Next is the software. The phone comes with Android 7.1 Nougat and has recently been updated to Android 9.0 Pie. Following the name of the phone, Android Pie gives the phone the essentials and doesn't leave in any gimmicks. Essential is proud to say that this phone got Android Pie on the same day that Google released it, and I can't argue with that. Sure, this is their only phone, but you don't see companies like Razer or OnePlus doing the same, and you definitely won't see Samsung or Motorola doing it either. Android Pie brings some new features, like a slightly updated UI, screenshot button in the power menu, adaptive battery, and the gesture system. The gesture system is a little bit clunky right now, and I tried using it, but I turned it off. Maybe in future updates they will make it a little bit less clunky, and I'll try to use it again. But until then, this is what I'm left with. Just like Android Oreo, this update is a big and small update, but it seems to cause the phone to be a little bit more stable and not break down easily. The software never gets put into the scoring, but it will get a decent 9 out of 10. The last score is the future-proofing score. The phone has been out for a year, and there have been some mixed issues with this phone. Initially, I bought a phone that would only charge when the phone was off and wouldn't do anything when it was on. After looking that up, it seemed to be a common issue. Other common issues are with the network connectivity. This includes cellular network, Wi-Fi, and Bluetooth. While I haven't had any terrible issues, the phone coverage seems to be slightly weaker than phones like the iPhone X or the Galaxy S9 Plus. Also, the Bluetooth was iffy in my car and sometimes would take about 2 to 3 minutes to connect. The battery seemed to be good for now, but unfortunately it's going to be difficult to change because the screen needs to be removed in the process. Also, I had a viewer contact Essential, and yeah, they're pretty much saying the same thing as what I was saying. The USB-C port and the 128GB standard are good bonuses as well, showing that this phone can handle some large data transfers. The Snapdragon 835 processor is a year old, but it still should be perfect for the next 2 or 3 years. I also want to say that this phone lacks a headset jack, and that sucks. Overall, I would say that this phone is future-proof and gets a 7.5 out of 10. Add up the scores and the phone gets a 39 out of 50, or 78%. The phone is nice, but the original price made this an ugly phone. Now at $400, this seems like a good buy, but there are some weird things about this phone that you have to get past. The notch is weird at first and kind of pointless, but it is a talking point of the phone. Other than that, this is actually a pretty awesome phone, even with that LCD screen. And that's it. Let me know what else you want me to review in the comment section below or on Twitter at MattofRWR. And I have a question for you. Do you think that the headset jack is part of the essentials of a flagship phone? Let me know and feel free to follow me on the social media listed above. Also, subscribe to my channel for the basics video. Every sub helps. And if you like these videos, click that bell button. Thanks for watching.